Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I will be showing you how to wrap the body of your fairy with embroidery floss. So in step one, we twisted together this cute little doll using a piece of floral wire, some embroidery floss for the hair, and a wooden bead for the head. I have some embroidery floss that I will be using to wrap her body, and it is the same skin tone as the color I painted her head. So there are 3 skin tones available in my fairy kits. There's a light, a medium, and a dark. And you'll find a link for my fairy kits below. If you are a fairy maker that has your own supplies, I hope you find this tutorial helpful. I hope I can give you some extra tips and tricks. Let's get started. For this step, we will also need a sharp pair of scissors, and of course I have my trusty glue gun set on low. I like using a dual temperature glue gun because it's easier to work with. Okay, and then we have our twisted together fairy. So first things first, I am going to smooth her hair out a little bit and cut off this straggly piece so it's not getting in our way when we are wrapping our fairy. It's important to decide which side will be the front of your doll and which side will be the back. So I like the back of my doll to be the side where the wires have crossed over in the back. It almost looks more like her shoulders and it doesn't lay as smooth. So pay attention to that. And obviously, as we're making our doll, we're going to be paying more attention to how the front looks. Okay, let's get started. Grab your glue gun and put a tiny dab of glue right at the base of her torso. And I just lay my thread across it, and then you're going to start evenly wrapping up to underneath her arm. So trim off that little excess piece of thread, and then evenly wrap all the way up to right underneath her arms. And for some reason, the hair while I was filming this kept getting in my way to the point that it was either really annoying or really amusing. I couldn't decide. So once you get up to underneath her arms, you're gonna take it as close as you possibly can, right so you're underneath her arms. And then we're going to move from the bottom of one arm up and over the shoulder on the other side. So we are wrapping in a diagonal and we are going up and over that shoulder and right underneath the arm on the other side. And I do spend a lot of time checking the front and the back of my doll and making sure that I'm wrapping evenly. Another tip, if you ever have a wire that's kind of poking up and giving you problems when you're wrapping your fairy, you can always grab some small pliers. These are jewelry making pliers, and just kind of flatten that wire down. It seems to help a lot. Then I'm going to wrap around the center once, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm wrapping from underneath one arm up and over the other shoulder in a diagonal, and then I'm going to start wrapping straight down the arm. You can see I'm wrapping evenly. And once I get almost to her hand, I'm going to take my glue gun and I'm going to put some glue right over that little opening where her hand is. Just a small dab of glue. And then I'm going to slowly wrap to the end of her hand. And I like adding gloves to my dolls because you don't have to worry about completely covering the very tip of their hand. You can also go back through and use a marker to cover that up if you want it more covered. And then another thing I'll do is take the tip of my glue gun to remelt the glue that's already there. So you can see I'm working slowly and just trying to get it to the very end of her hand. And then once again, I utilize the tip of the glue gun that's very hot to melt down the glue that's already there. So I'm not adding extra glue that I don't need. And then I'm going to wrap all the way back up her arm. And if I find that I'm not wrapping evenly, I will unwrap it and go back a little bit and then rewrap. So just wrapping in an even layer all the way back to the center of the doll. And once I get back to the center, I'm going to wrap it up and over the opposite shoulder, and then I'm going to wrap the other arm. So evenly wrapping all the way to the end. And once I get to that little spot where her hand is, I'm going to take my glue gun and add some glue. So just slowing this part down so you can see in more detail. So I'm going to add a small dab of glue right there. You don't need a lot. And then I wrap as close to the end as I possibly can. And I have found that because that glue starts to set a little bit, if I grab my glue gun and just press my glue gun against the glue, it'll remelt it and help it hold the thread in place better. And then once again, just wrapping in an even layer back to the middle of the doll. Once I get back to the end of her arm, I am going to take it in a V again, underneath one arm, over the shoulder, and then I go around the middle, and then I'm going to go up and over the other shoulder. Now at this point, I like to turn her to the back and make sure that all of that wire is covered up. And sometimes, depending on how the wire was twisted, you might need to rewrap the thread around the center a little bit more. So doing a V from underneath one side up and over the shoulder of the other side to make sure that all of that wire is covered up with your thread. Then I'm going to take it up and over her shoulder and we are going to wrap her neck. So push the bead up as tight as you possibly can and wrap up evenly right to underneath her head and then evenly wrap back down. So you can see I went all the way up to the top there. We don't want any of the white cloth to be showing. We want it all to be covered in thread. Then I wrap back down, and then once again, I'm going to take it from underneath one arm up and over the shoulder of the other side. This is what we've got. And you can see there is a tiny bit of the white showing at the very tip of her hand. If you want to, you can take a marker that coordinates with the color of the skin tone and cover that up. Or if you are adding gloves, you won't have to worry about that. There will be a link for gloves below. And also there's a huge flower fairy making playlist that I will link below that gives you all sorts of hairstyles and different fun fairies and different ideas. Okay, then we wrap back down the center all the way to the end of her torso, and then we're going to wrap one leg evenly. And you can see as I'm wrapping this, sometimes I stop. If I realize I'm wrapping it unevenly, I will stop, unwind it a little bit, and then start over again because we want it to be evenly wrapped. And once I get almost to the end of her foot, I'm going to take my glue gun, tiny dab of glue, like you don't need a lot, guys, and then get to the very end. I'm going to take my glue gun again. You can see I'm just using the tip of the glue gun to melt that glue, and I'm going to wrap all the way up her leg and do the exact same thing on the other side. So here's a close-up of me kind of just melting down that glue with the tip of the glue gun. It really does make a difference, and that way you're not adding extra glue that you don't need. And then of course, we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So I do take it around her waist a couple times before I go down that second leg. So just wrapping in an even layer all the way to the end. Right before I get to her foot, I'll add a tiny dab of glue, wrapping as evenly as I possibly can. So once I get to the end, I'm going to take my glue gun, add just the littlest bit of glue, get as close to the end as I can, and then start to wrap back up, and I will use the tip of my glue gun to melt that down and make sure it's nice and even. And there was a little bit of the cloth from the cloth covered wire poking out, so I did just trim that off. And wrap all the way back up. Okay, and once we reach her waist, I'm going to wrap around her waist just a few times to even that thread up, because we want her torso to be nice and smooth with the thread. And then I'm going to take a little bit of glue, and usually I add the glue to the back of the doll because you don't see it if there ends up being a little bump from the glue. And then I'm going to trim off the thread. And if you do purchase one of my kits and use some of the DMC thread, you will have some left over. Depending on how tightly you wrap your doll, you'll probably have enough thread to make another doll, so keep that in mind. And then, so I've trimmed that off. Now I'm going to grab my glue gun, and once again, using the tip of the glue gun, I'm going to melt that and just press that thread down so it lays nice and flat and smooth against our doll. And that's it, guys. We have just finished step 2 in creating our fairy. So the first step was to twist our wire with the wooden bead and the embroidery floss. Step 2 was to wrap her with the embroidery floss we've chosen for her skin. And step 3 is to create her clothing. So in the next video, I will be showing you a couple of different options on how you can use the thread to wrap your doll and create a cute top for your beautiful little fairy doll. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this, give it a thumbs up. If you would like to purchase a fairy kit, there will be a link below in the description of the video. And if you are one of my fairy followers that has all of their own amazing supplies, I hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you guys in the next video.